The objective of this lesson is to be able to have a line chart with dates and to skip the blank dates. Like for example here, the 6th of Jan, you can see that it's still in my graph. In a previous lesson, which I'm going to put the link for in the description, we have looked at a manual way to do it, which is quick, but it's not the best way. You could also do this using some formulas, but the formulas are really cumbersome. So I advise you to use this methodology, which is macro based. Now, some of you might not be familiar with macros, but if you follow the right steps that I'm going to show you, and you copy paste my macro, which I'm going to paste in the description, you just modify a few things in the macro, it will work for you. So let's do it. Let's start. We have here date and value, which is my sanitized date and value, where I'm just going to pick up the dates that are non-blanks, and I'm going to put them in a row. So first of all, you need to go to developer. If you don't have developer, you go here, more, options. In options, you have customize ribbon, and you click on this developer thing. Now I have it, so I'm going to do Visual Basic. I get this window, I go up, right click, and I do insert module. So now I have a module here, and I'm gonna write a sub. So let's move this a little bit so you can have more space to see things. Sub date picker. Then you do this. In this, I need to pick every date that is non-blank here and write it here. So I have two indices. One index where I'm going to go through this, and one index to paste the data. Because for example, let's say I have an index called I and it starts at 2, at row 2. When it reaches row 7, if I'm copy pasting, let's say here my index J, for example, it will be 6, right? Once I go here, my index I will be 7, and I won't put anything here. Then my index I will become 8, but I want to put the 8th row of my data in the 7th row in my other column. So this is why you need separate indices. Let's open this back and do dim I, comma, j as long. Long is a type of data in Excel, which means it's a very long number in case you have a very big range. And we're going to use a for loop for I equal. Here you start with your first row. What is your first row? It's 2. 2, your last row. I'm going to assume here it's 60. You can put anything, it depends on your situation. Again, it's your first row and it's your last row. First and last row. So usually when I do this, I put a very big number because the macro will be really fast and it's not gonna matter, right? So I can even put 1,000 just to be safe. So this way you won't have to change this as long as you start at like the same row and you end up anywhere. So this is one thing, one time setup you can do. Then you do next I. So that means for Excel that start at 2, then do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which are my rows. Next, we're gonna check whether this is blank. So I'm gonna write if. Then you need to know which sheet is this. So Excel has a numbering for sheets. As you can see, I have sheet 8, 9, etc. If I go up, I can find that my sheet 19 is called date chart 2, which is the same name here. So I can use sheet 19. If sheet 19 dot range, then we need to find the column. My column here is A. Again, if you have a different column, you can just change this and you're fine. So the setup is very easy to do. You do it one time, more or less you'll be fine. And then I have to put my index dot value. Is this one is different than nothing? Then, so this means different than nothing. Here I'm gonna do and if. So if this is different than nothing, I want the data to come here. So I'm gonna write sheet 19. Now we know the sheet. Again, you have to change this based on your circumstance. And then column what? E. So if you have a different column, again, if you're writing it here, you just write the column name. And this time you use the other index, .j value is equal to, you write one here and then you copy paste this. So I'm saying that if this is not blank, I want to copy paste the data in this cell, right? Now, J, we haven't started. J, I is indexed to 2, but J, we didn't start it. So I'm going to say J is equal to second row. So we initialize. Everything I write in green, by the way, with this apostrophe means it's not going to get executed with the code, for the ones that are not very familiar with macros. So again, wherever you want to write the data, you have to initialize your J. Now, we did this, but once we have filled one cell with the data, I need to have my J move to the other cell. So if another new data comes, I write it down, right? So I'm going to say J is equal to J plus 1. What does it mean? Let's take an example. 1 of Jan is not blank, right? So I'm going to write 1 of Jan here, and then I'm going to set up my J, which was 2, to 3. 2, I becomes 3. 2 of Jan is not blank, right? So I'm going to write it here and set up my J to 4, etc. Once I reach I equals 7, it's blank. So I skip it. And J doesn't change. I becomes 8. It is what? It is non-blank. So it's going to write it in the 7th row here, right? And it moves on. So this is how it works. And the other thing we need to be careful about is that whenever you run a macro and you write something in Excel, it's gonna stay. So I need to make sure that my data is starting blank. So I'm gonna show you an example. If I run this, okay, I got some data. Now the problem is if I start having a date less, for example, let's just do this and format a little bit. So let's assume I formatted. Let's assume the 7th of Jan is gone. And I go and I run my macro again by clicking here. The problem is I get at the end 221 January. Why? Because it didn't delete the data. So I have to delete the data. So I'm going to write sheet 19 dot range E, then 2 to E. I can, again, I'm hard coding some of the things here, but again, if we go into a more detailed macro, everything can become flexible, but I don't want to make it complicated for you. So I'm just going to do 1000. So the first 1000 cells in column E dot value, I'm going to make them blank. Once I do this and run the macro, you can see that this has updated. So now I have the macro. I need to call the macro with a button, right? So I'm going to do insert, illustrations, shapes, and I can select any shape. So I'm going to select this shape. Okay, and again, you can customize this. You can write inside. I'm going to say refresh, for example. And I need to tie this to my macro. So I'm going to click on it, right click, assign macro, and I'm going to see here my date picker. So I click on it, and now if you see, I'm going to delete the data manually. I click, I will get my dates here. Next, once you get your dates, you need to get the value associated with this date. So here we can use VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP, and then we say lookup value is this. We select our two columns, we do 2 and we do false. Now this will work well, but the problem is what will happen when I do this? You will get an NA. Now Excel will not bother with NA, so you can do this, but to make it clearer, we can do if error, then we do VLOOKUP, and if it's an error, then just put a blank. So this is the if errors formula. So if error, VLOOKUP, put a blank. If not, you get the VLOOKUP. So I'm just going to drag this till here, for example. And as you can see, I have blank cells. So now let's make a new chart. So we're going to move this one. And then we select the data where we have actually no blanks. And then we do insert. And we click on this. We click on this. And we have a chart. Now, we need to fix a few things here. Number one is if you right click, select data, you edit this because here I only selected those dates to make the chart. You select until the last possible date and you say OK. Next, if you see, I still have the 6th of Jan or the 7th of Jan here that is blank, right? So what I will do, I will right click, format axis, and I'll do text axis. What happens is Excel doesn't know now it's a date, so it will skip whatever is blank or whatever doesn't exist in my data set. So this is another thing you need to do. And then if you see, this is my graph. If, for example, I delete those 3 dates and I click on refresh, as you can see, I get my new graph automatically. Anything I will add in the middle will automatically appear as soon as I click on refresh. Last tip for those of you who are not very familiar with macros are twofold. Number one, whenever you're gonna put this macro and test it, create another version of your file. Because once you click on the button, anything that happens in your Excel, you cannot do Ctrl Z or undo. So it will stay. So just be careful on this. Second of all, when you save your file, do save as and then select macro enable workbook. If you don't and you save it as a normal workbook and you close it, you will lose all your macros.